Hello and welcome to the program. I am Imonia Mariri. On Monday, May 6, 2024, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, directed commercial banks in the country to commence a 0.5% compulsory charge on every electronic financial transaction by bank customers for cybersecurity levy on behalf of the federal government. The levy is prescribed by Section 44, Subsection 2 of the Cybercrimes Prohibition Prevention Act 2015 with Amendment Act of 2024. Although this act has been in existence since 2015, it had not been activated until now, following a directive by the Office of the National Security Advisor to the CBN to implement its provisions. Since the CBN circular, there has literally been an uproar by individuals, civil society organizations, and groups such as organized labor, the organized private sector, and even the House of Representatives, which ironically passed the amendment bill only in February 2024. Most of the criticisms of the implementation of the levy is to the effect that it would worsen the economic conditions of Nigerians, contract economic activities, discourage local and foreign investment flows, and, by extension, undermine the growth of the national economy. Now, on the other hand, the position of the House of Representatives is that the provisions of the law are being interpreted and implemented wrongly by the CBN. It argues that the law in Section 44 sub 2 and the second schedule to the Cybercrimes Act did not put the burden of the levy on bank customers, but on telecommunications companies, internet service providers, banks and other financial institutions, insurance companies, and the Nigerian Stock Exchange. However, there is a more fundamental challenge to the constitutionality of not just the cybersecurity levy, but around the boundaries of legislative powers and the erosion of federalism. Proponents of this position insist that it amounts to legislative overreach by the National Assembly in enacting the Cybercrimes Act and thereby eroding the powers and efficacy of the residual legislative list in the Constitution. In other words, they argue that the powers conferred by Section 4, Subsection 2 of the 1999 Constitution on the National Assembly to make laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the Federation is being overreached by casting its net too wide to include issues not contained in the exclusive or concurrent legislative lists, such as levies and taxes. It is therefore calling to question the legality or otherwise of some portions of the Cybercrimes Act as it relates to the imposition of levies and taxes, which appends the residual list, which here, of course, is the exclusive preserve of the state government, and therefore erodes the practice of federalism. This will be a major point of discourse on the program today. And my guests are here already in the studio. Mr. Okpatola Victor is a legal practitioner who is based here in the Nigerian capital, Abuja. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. We're also joined by Mr. Aliyu Ilyas. He is an economist. Thank you so much, Mr. Ilyas, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, we have joining us a familiar face, Mr. Steve Nwachukwu, who is also an economist. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome. Right. So let's delve straight into our discussion. Mr. Okpatola, first, let us try as much as possible to deal with some of the substantive issues that have been thrown up by this before we go into the broader and maybe more fundamental issues of legality, constitutionality, or otherwise. Now, there has been a lot of uproar about this levy, this cybersecurity levy, both from individuals and groups. For you, what's your take? Because even the National Assembly that passed that law seem now to have some divergent views about its interpretation and implementation.
Okay, thank you very much. Apart from the legality issue, like you said, so I wouldn't go into legality issues yet, but broadly speaking, generally, this particular levy is coming at the time that the mood of the country is quite sensitive to issues of levies, taxation, and especially the rate of the, what the previous policies of the government has actually driven Nigerians into. So, in regards to the previous removal of subsidy, floating of the naira, all these previous national policies has increased the numbers of people in poverty as it is currently. So, this particular levy, minding the fact that it will take more money out of the pockets of Nigeria, is coming at the wrong time. And talking more broadly, when you look at the composition of the act, the fact that something is quite interesting. What is interesting is the fact that the levy, the total amount that will be taken from the levy, is made subject to the office of the National Advisor. If you look at the office of the National Security Advisor in the Constitution only made mention of that office once. And that office was, in regards to its role, its position, it's an advisory role to the president, is to advise the president on issues of national security. This is not to undermine the importance of that role, but it still remains that that role is an advisory role. So, subjecting trillions of naira to a role that is advisory is not what the Constitution envisages. What the Constitution envisages is when you're subjecting public funds to the tune that can accumulate to trillions of naira, the right approach is to set up a commission that will have a structure to manage that money, and also, very importantly, that the people can call to question through the structure of the commission and the hierarchy of the commission. So that's my view on a broader sense, so as not to go into the legal perspective.
All right, let me come to you, Mr. Elias. First of all, let's get something out of the way. Is it 0.5% or 0.005%?
Right, I think
To educate Nigeria.
right, very important and very instructive. I think the major thing is 0.5%. Because when you say 0.00 or 0.005%, let's just have it at 0.5%. That's 0.5%. So that is just how it's been fixed. I think there's need to educate Nigeria properly on. So when we say 0.005 is also equivalent to 0.5%, which is half percentage. However, the news of imposing such a levy has become quite surprising, as you could see the reaction, even both from the National Assembly, who actually embarked on reviewing the law. I think the challenge is that we must be sensitive, like he rightly said, to the matters of taste. I think that's how we should put it, because it's quite clear that at this point in time, purchasing power is becoming so difficult for Nigerians. But the argument now is that, it's not for public, it's for some organization. But in the long run, it's going to be transferred to the consumers, because no matter how you bring about levies, in the long run, a manufacturer who is transferring money, who have also suffered these loss, is going to, in the long run, transfer it to the consumer. But if you also look at it critically, it's about 10 levy or so, or 10 levy for banking transaction, right from transfer, SMS payment. So if you look at the myriad of it, it's come in the long run. It has negative impact on the purchasing power. And having also looked at the federal government policy in this administration, you remember the first day President Bola Ahmed Tinubu became president, he made a pronouncement of removal of fuel subsidy, which is quite fiscal policy. So if you look at most things that actually happen, is looking at taking more from Nigerians, why the federal government have more. Because if you look at it, generally, government now have more. So ideally, there's always budget for Nigerian defense. There's always budget for security. I think that should be under that purview, not bringing it upon Nigerians again. Because if you look at it very critically, it's going back to what Nigerians to pay bear the brunt rather of such levies.
Mr. Wanchuku, this act, this Cyber Crimes Act, has been in existence since 2015. And the amendment that was made to it was only made as of February this year. And in fact, many are wondering why an act that has been in existence since 2015, signed into law by President Goodluck Jonathan, and all through the 8 years of the Buhari administration, it was not activated. Why it is being activated now? Why was the act in itself left dormant for over 8 years?
For first and foremost, I think the controversies is who is paying. Just like you said, the law has been in existence, and the aspect of the commercialization is where the government looked at now and dusted it. I said, I'm looking for money. So this is another way also raising billions of naira to fund my government and all the rest. So first, is the art the letter and the spirit of the art, is it good intended? Yes, it's well intended. But the question or the concern of most Nigerians or most analysts like us is the commercialization of that art, giving a certain percentage to an invisible office. Just like the lawyer was trying to say, how many times was the National Security Advisor Office mentioned in the Constitution? And the modus operandi of the same agency or government advisor of the government. Take, for instance, now, you give them this money, they take 200 billion, and you can't call them to account for such money. So the question is the controversies around who is spending it and who also is paying. If by the spirit of the law, institutions like Nigerian Stock Exchange, the communication, and the rest of them, the commercial banks, and those who actually are heavy players in the cyberspace of Nigeria are meant to pay some certain percentage to government, that is well intended. But the ambiguity now is on the circular released by the Central Bank of Nigeria, who have thrown Nigerians into confusions. Which sections, or should we look at the circular, or should we be looking at the law itself? So I think there should be more clarity from the government.
That has to do with the interpretation of the letter
law.
and spirit of the law. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Let me come back to Mr. Okpatola and to ask a question that has arisen from their intervention, which is to ask whether it is normal to leave a piece of legislation unactivated or dormant for close to 9 years.
Basically,
are there any such other laws that that may not have been activated that could now be activated?
Definitely, there are. The federal government, it's an organ that is saddled with the enforcement of laws in this country. So if the federal government, for whatever reason, does not take a law as priority to enforce it, chances are, by so doing, it has left it dormant. So it is not. In this country, we have plethora of laws. That's why Lord Dennis says, God forbid that I know all the laws, because we have numerous laws. And a lot of these laws are actually not enforced. And as a matter of fact, if some of these laws, a lot of these laws, if they come into public knowledge, it will be very, very funny, because some of these laws are a form of anathema to the current economy we run in this country. That's why I do encourage people, and Nigerians generally, that there ought to be NGOs, CSOs, individuals that are currently on the matters of the National Assembly 24/7 to monitor the kind of laws they are introducing. Because these laws it is easier to raise uproars about these laws at the point of first reading, second reading, committee. It is always easier, and not as easier to raise uproar when it has already been passed into law. So there should be NGOs whose major duty is to gatekeep national assemblies, to know the kind of laws they're introducing every day in that house, and to be able to tell Nigerians, to be able to raise uproars for Nigerians to subject some of these laws to scrutiny. Because if you watch it very well, there are a lot of laws that will be, if the National Assembly is sitting today, House of Rep is sitting today, there are a lot of things that are going on in the House of Rep today, in the plenary, that numerous Nigerians do not know about, and it affects our economic, as a country, and the purchasing power of individuals. So in regards to what you asked, sir, there are numerous laws, and the enforcement of laws is for the executive. So there are numerous laws like that.
So whose responsibility is it to bring it to the attention and knowledge of Nigerians, of such laws?
Anybody can take that responsibility. Any individual, any organization can take that responsibility. But the enforcement itself is for the federal government.
Before you enforce, you have to enlighten people.
Yeah, you have to enlighten people. But there's this saying in law that the fact that you don't know that a law exists is not a defense, except in few cases, as the case may be. But, it is given that once a law is passed, it is given that everybody knows about the law.
All right, Mr. Elias, let me come back to the issue of the CBN circular and the provisions of the Act. Many argue, like Mr. Wanchuku, that the provisions of the Act is different from the interpretation that the CBN has given to it in the circular it issued on Monday. Whereas the CBN seemed to suggest that it is the individual customers that are supposed to be paying this levy to be collected by the banks and remitted to the federal government. Others, some legal luminaries have also joined the fray to suggest that no, it is the other way around. It is these organizations, communication companies, banks, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, internet service providers, and the rest of them that are supposed to pay this levy.
Right. I think, first and foremost, there is need for our president or present government communicators to make sure they handle our issues very, very well, because it's quite confusing, because we have an organized country like Nigeria, and we'll get to be having message from different places. First and foremost, it's actually domiciled in the CBN. CBN are to collect the money and to give, they said may give 40% to NSA. That's how the provision actually provide.
Yes.
But in terms of the clarity of it, even up to now, we have not seen them coming out and say no. Because from what we are saying now, if it actually came about from the perspective that it is some companies like SEC, organizations like SEC, like banks, like insurance organizations that are going to pay, who actually are the player in this cloud, so to say. We wouldn't have had this uproar to this extent. But now it was said that, the message just came and they said exempted. Now list people that are actually exempted, instead of them to project more of people that actually pay. But in the long run, and the short of it is that Nigerians are going to bear the brunt of it. Because you can't tell me that a bank or any other organization that are on the cloud will do business and we have to pay more. Because if you look at that money, you might be looking at 5 naira from a particular amount, but you look at it in a bigger way. And another challenge is that you did not tell them that they should pay the money after their profit. There's a way when money comes, total of it is what you are saying you are going to collect. So if a company is transferring a particular amount, you are charging that amount, not maybe from your profit. That's another angle to actually look at. So I think they need to look at it very, very well. But my challenge now is that National House of Rep is saying, okay, carry on it. The Senate is saying, go ahead, we are in support of it. So we are waiting for, maybe Mr. President will give us more interpretation to it. But for most Nigerians, it's a challenging period to introduce such a levy.
Shouldn't that be the responsibility of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice to be giving us a better interpretation of of this piece of legislation?
It depends on the information. For me, I think CBN should have done more because it has to do with financial issue. They should have come clear on this to make Nigeria understand how it actually works.
Okay, Mr. Machuku, what was your take on that? Because if the argument is that it is companies, stock exchange, insurance companies, communication companies that are supposed to pay this levy, where are they expected to get the levy from? Like he said, is it part of their profit margin that they are supposed to remit? Or are they not, I mean, like we know of banks, will they not pass that on to their customers, to their clients?
Of course, of course. Definitely, whosoever is to pay is still the consumer here that will be at the brunt, whether it's the institution or whether it's individuals that receive such services. It's still the consumer. The consumer now is Nigerian. So whether it's by institutional deduction or by individual deduction, it's still the consumer. So that's why I'm not concerned about who is paying, but I'm much concerned about the percentage which is being charged and the loop of money involved in this very exercise, because you cannot continually to have such kind of volume of money being channeled to a particular section of the government or an office endlessly. Yes, I know that the attack, the cyber security or cyber attacks that Nigerians receive or the commercial banks, of a truth, yes, there is a cyber threat. There is an attack ongoing. People lose their phones and all the rest of them. There are a lot of criminals there behind the keyboards doing a lot of attacks and demanding for ransoms. I know that the Office of the National Security Advisor may not be able to start saying most of these very things in details. Yes, we know there is an existence of attack on our infrastructure, on our financial system, on critical national infrastructures. Even I'm a player in the Nigerian capital market. I know for sure that the CSCS, even the registrars, even the Nigerian Stock Exchange has to make sure they protect their database. Even as we speak here, I know this institution as a communication institution also receives some kind of cyber attack. So in existence, there is a threat. But the question, you don't subject it to some financial deduction or commitment of Nigeria. It's part of national security. Just like we have our rules are too unsecure. Traveling from here, from Abuja to Kaduna, is like a death trap. Will you charge Nigerians so that you provide them security to move along that road? Just going from Okene or going from any of these ISIS to the South-East, you find out there are kidnappings going on everywhere. Are you going to subject Nigerians to provide security for them? Provide money that they will provide security. So all the attacks are coming from all angles. So government should take up their responsibility. Yes, there are positives of funds. Government is looking ways to make sure they receive money so that they can, take care of these issues. I know for sure that all the commercial banks and all these mentioned institutions have some level of involvement or commitment or resources to defend this very database or defend their space where they operate in the internet. So for sure, there are existing funds. It's a question of having a way to improve in this very fund. The banks has money, the Nigerian Stock Exchange have money, and the rest of them that plays in this system has money. So it's a question of making sure that they make appropriate commitment to this case. If the National Security Advisor is bearing the brunt, I know for sure that the banks are independently also defending their cyberspace. So it's not a question of just the National Security Advisor. I know the threats are coming from all angles, but the truth remains that the percentage is outrageous. It's an open end, in the sense that when I do transfer now, and I go somewhere and receive the money, or someone receives it again, it's an open-end cost or open-end deduction on those very spaces that Nigerians operate. So it should be some level of limit, and some amount should be named. It should be a one-off payment, and develop our cyberspace or to make sure that these attacks are not too numerous or are not dangerous to our system. So not a continuous, because take for instance, in the 2023, the total amount of money that went through the e-payment is close to 60 trillion. If you do 60 trillion times this very percentage, that's about 300 billion naira.
That is what is meant that possibly the National Security Advisor will receive annually. And it's growing on daily basis. As at 2024, it's going to be more than 60 trillion. 2025 is going to hit maybe 100 trillion because Nigerians are adapting or moving into the electronic space to settle business transaction. For a 10 naira or 51,000 naira transaction, they will switch their card and make payments. So the growing number of people receiving this very e-payment platform or e-payments activities are all growing. So the amount or the volumes of transaction conducted may hit even 120 trillion in 2027 or 2026. So are you saying that you are going to increase this very volume of money, activities going on in this very space, that the volume, like I say, 2023 alone, data available is about 60 trillion. Times this by this percentage of 0.005, that's about 300 billion. So assuming 2024, it hits 100 billion or 70 trillion. So it means that the National Security Advisor and the CBN will be receiving such loop of money to be defending our cyberspace. This is where it's at treasure. So I am not concerned. I am not much worried about the law. I'm concerned about the percentage. It should be one-off or it should be reduced to the BRS minimum. 0.05% is quite high.
But like Victor said, maybe it's because when this law was being considered in the National Assembly, first in 2015 and then in 2024, we as citizens did not pay enough attention.
Beyond paying attention, I think I will even look at it from this perspective, that when this law was in place or won't be considered by the National Assembly, the volume of transactions, this e-payment has not been widened. The volume of transaction within the e-space is maybe somewhere less than 10 or 15 trillion. So they are looking at the size of the phone. Now it's growing. Nigerians are imbibing, migrating into the electronic payment system. For every single transaction, for even the driver at the street there, you find someone, can I do transfer for you? You want to buy something of a 1,000, you are doing transfer. 500 naira, you are doing. So Nigerians are immersing or eroding or moving into this very e-payment platform. And so the volume of money involved have increased. They must have envisaged at that time, 2015, that is around 10 trillion. So 10 trillion against this will be giving us roughly something less. Now it's 60 trillion and it's growing. The more people in the rural area is migrating into the electronic payment platform. So the size of the fund will continue. So the point is this money is too much to be accounted for. Let me use it that way. It's too much to be accounted for. So it will subject these very individuals to corrupt practices because there is a sex money within their purview.
All right, let me come back to you, Victor, and let me read to you the contentious provisions of the Act. For Section 44, subsection 2A, it says, they shall be paid and credited into the fund established under subsection 1 of this section and domiciled in Central Bank of Nigeria, a levy of 0.005% of all electronic transactions by the businesses specified in the second schedule to this Act. And the second schedule clearly identifies 5 categories of businesses: GSM service providers and all telecommunications companies, internet service providers, banks and other financial institutions, insurance companies, and Nigerian Stock Exchange. Now, opinion is divided, even by legal practitioners, over the interpretation of this provision of the Act. Why some of them say the language of the drafters is inelegant and ambiguous. That's the language they have used, ambiguous. Others say it is quite clear and unambiguous. Which is which here? Which one do we follow? Is this clear enough? Or is this ambiguous in its drafting?
Okay. The first thing is, personally, a lot of persons have expressed their grievances in regards to both the law and the percentage. The drafting of that particular section, I think that's the 215 section. The new amendment, the drafting was not that elegant. If you look at the drafting, in one breath, you see 0.5 you use 0.5%, you also see 0.005% in the same, what's the name? Then it's in bracket, now goes ahead to say half percentage or something. So it was not elegantly drafted. It seems something hurriedly, just inserted. Just hurriedly inserted into it. But basically, apparently, it's the contention is that is in regards to the percentage. Me personally, I have, like I said, I and some other persons have issues when it comes to the percentage and when it comes to the law. Now, if we are saying that the percentage should be reduced, be increased, be maintained, what we are saying indirectly is that Nigerians have officially started paying for security in this country. That's what we are saying. So Nigerians, so let's just put it on record. Let's be formal about it. That individuals or businesses or whoever it is that is charged, and whoever it is that those that are charged will end up charging, are indirectly paying for security. That is just the end and long short of it. So if the government is telling us that the trillions of naira or the billions of naira that is allocated for defense in this country is not enough or is not capable, and if the security votes...
Victor, you were explaining the Amendment Act of 2024 clearly states that a levy of 0.05% and in bracket 0.005 is the equivalent of to 0.5% of all electronic transaction value by the business specified in the second schedule to this act. Now here it clearly says the business.
Yes.
But by the circular of the CBN, it appears that it is the individual customer, the individuals that are now targeted.
I actually believe that it was the way the circular was worded. That's why the confusion came about. And I'm sure the CBN will align its position with the Act, which stipulates that it's particularly in reference to the business stated in the Act. But be that as it may, like I mentioned earlier on, some persons have expressed their grievances, both in regards to the law and in regards to the percentage. That if the federal government is saying that this percentage should be paid by businesses, in the long run, the cost will be transferred to Nigerian who this business renders services to. So the federal government should just come out and tell Nigerians that, from henceforth, Nigerians are paying for security, which is the foremost, according to libertarians, which is the foremost major duty of government anywhere in the world.
Victor, to add to what you're saying, I think Nigerians have actually been paying for each time you pay tax, you are paying for your security.
Okay.
So whatever monies are used for to secure you, but just this is just a totally new thing, cyber security. We've been having other security issues that government have been attending to. So the concern of most of us, and I'm sure it's also your concern, is the quantum of money involved.
No, I'm saying this particular law is brazen. It's brazen, telling Nigerians to pay for cybersecurity levy for something as vague. So, particularly, let me say, do you know that in the long runs, Nigeria will not have a say, one, on how this money is spent, one. They will not have a say in determining, if you go to court now, as an individual, if you go to court to question how this money is spent, maybe next year, to question how this money is spent, do you know what will happen? They will raise locus.
Yes.
That you don't have locus standing. You don't have particular grievance beyond and above any other Nigerian. So Nigerians in the long run will not be able to question the office of the national advisor, how he has spent 40% of probably trillions of naira.
Is even a bit different. If you look at this, it's as if government wants to generate revenue.
Yes.
They're not looking at a avenue of generating revenue because assuming they said that 100% will be generated and will be domiciled in CBN, they may give 40% to NSA. So it simply means another avenue for federal government to generate more revenue.
And even more, it is vague and non-specific. Assuming and not considering that 40% is given to Office of National Security, the remaining 60%, it is not defined as to what it will be used for.
It will go to federal government coffers and
For
they will
what?
use it. That is it.
No.
And that's
Okay, if
why we
you're
need to
generating money for the purpose of cybersecurity or cyber laws, as the case may be, then the money must be particularly stated that it is for this purpose. If you're generating, that's tax and levy.
It is stated.
That what?
Like I keep saying, I'm laying emphasis on the volume of money.
No. It is stated that the money will be used for what?
To protect your cyberspace.
No. The 40% that goes to Office of NSC
The entire money is for the cyber security. The national security will receive this. Then the CBN may, in conjunction with commercial banks and the rest of them, they are protecting, build up capacity.
To do what?
To protect those transactions
Vague.
you and I conduct. Yes, that's what is the intention of the law. As we speak, let me tell you, in the banking space, there is a section or a department they call the IT. It's totally restricted. There is no single commercial banks, both even microfinance, that does not have a very well secured IT space, that even some staff are restricted not to enter it. This is the one we are talking about. But the question is, the banks already have in existence, the institutions, sorry,
of their own.
They have it. But the NSA and the rest of them are raising concerns that the attack is too much, that they needed to tax Nigerians to raise more money so that they can protect this cyberspace. The question, like I keep saying, why do you make it an open-ended that annually will be receiving, the office or the entire nation or the FG will be receiving close to 300 billion annually? That is the minimum. Like I said,
even subject to growing of the
Thank you. The transaction will be growing. As we speak, it's about 60 trillion activities or transactions conducted electronically. By 2024 ending, the data will change. It will hit 70 because more Nigerians are moving in. So the question is the size of money involved. That's why I'm clamoring. If there will be such law, perhaps to build capacity, it should not be like an open-ended, that it's a continually, you charge Nigerians. If you build the capacity, maybe in the next 10 years you can come back again and introduce it, then you stop again. It's not an annual. Every year Nigerians will raise 300 billion in this regard.
Mr. Patola, let me bring you back to the more fundamental issue that you raised some time ago, which has to do with the legality or constitutionality of this of the legislative powers of the National Assembly to make laws bordering on levies and taxes, and which you claim is an erosion of our federalism. Tell us more about that. How is that so? Because issues of security and banking, as in this case, for instance, are exclusively within the domain of the federal government.
Yes.
And by implication, the federal legislature.
Okay, thank you very much. You see, we make quite a number of assumptions. Issue of security is not only for the federal government. But before I delve into that, you know, when we talk about the legality of the act itself, in order to break it down, I will start by saying there are two important lists in the Constitution. That's the exclusive list and the concurrent list. For the benefit of our viewers, exclusive list is a list, it's a special list in the Constitution that only the National Assembly and the National Assembly have the powers to make laws on them. The concurrent list, the state has the powers to make laws on the concurrent list, but the National Assembly also have the powers to make laws on the concurrent list. So by doctrine of covering the field, on the concurrent list, once the National Assembly makes any law on those things on the concurrent list, the state cannot make any law that will contradict what the National Assembly has, the laws that National Assembly has made on those lists that are on the concurrent list. So when we say we have the exclusive list, then we have the concurrent list. Then those lists are not exhaustive. There are still other things that are left outside of those lists. That is what we refer to as a residual list. Residual list is not in the Constitution, but it has been litigated from the lowest court to the highest court in the land, and by the name residual, it means what is left. So it means what is left from exclusive list and concurrent list. So by implication, the residual list is exclusively for the State House of Assembly to make laws on it. So this cyber crime law, first of all, crime is local. So states makes law for crimes, except in particular situations where the federal government and the National Assembly have the exclusive powers to make laws on those, to make laws, then they can make criminal laws on those aspects that they have powers to make law on them, maybe the exclusive or the concurrent, like I've mentioned earlier on. So when you look at the exclusive list, when you look at the concurrent list, the exclusive list give the National Assembly power over defense. The exclusive list give National Assembly over security, and it talks about it in line with law enforcement agencies. So when we talk about defense, military defense, then it talks about the territorial integrity of Nigeria. That's when we talk about the military, army, navy, and all these other things. When we talk about security in regards to the law enforcement, when you look at that particular part that talks about security, it limits it to law enforcement. Then another part in the exclusive list talks about arms and ammunition. Then the part that talks about security in regards to law enforcement, police and law enforcement in Nigeria, under that list, it did not limit it to say the National Assembly or the federal government by the National Assembly as the total, what's the name when it comes to security. Then the argument here is when it comes to cyber crime. Now, don't let's confuse cybersecurity with cybercrime. This cybercrime law, when you look at it very well, it entails a lot of things. There are various things in this cybercrimes law that sometimes is not even related to cybercrime offense, as the case may be. So when it comes to cybercrime in Nigeria, there is nothing, absolutely nothing. I've made mention of the 4 most important things that people confuse to hold, that the National Assembly have the powers, and I'll make mention of one other thing, that the National Assembly have the powers to make law, to make the Cyber Crimes Act. Nothing in this exclusive list, or concurrent list as the case may be, talks about cyber crimes. Nothing. So that means it forms part of the residual list, because there's nothing in the concurrent list that talks about cybercrime. There's nothing in the exclusive list that talks about cybercrime. If the federal government is so elated to make laws about cybercrime, then amend the Constitution and include it in the exclusive list. If you notice, recently, there has been issues around the legality or illegality of the FCC Act. Agbakoba, SAN, actually discussed it recently, that when he says that okay, don't let me go into that, but let me just focus on it. So I won't.
So it's along this line that you argue that the National Assembly is overreaching itself.
And there's another argument in favor of the National Assembly making this Cybercrimes Act, which is the argument in Section 4 thereabout that says the National Assembly can make laws for the
peace, order,
and good governance of the Federation.
Nigeria, yeah.
But that argument, when you use that argument to reach a conclusion that the National Assembly can make law, can make cybercrimes law, a law that is not in the exclusive or concurrent list, meaning it's on the residual list. When you now use that argument to collect it, like the way you collect a toy from a 4-year-old baby, you collect it from the residual list, which the state has the exclusive jurisdiction on. When you use that portion of Section 4 to collect it from the state, it's very, very dangerous. It's dangerous because when you continue to perpetuate that argument, then it leaves, where's the boundary in which, that means the National Assembly, in the guise of legislating for the good, peace, and of the Federation, can pick anything under the residual list and legislate upon it. That's what makes that argument dangerous. And apart from that, there's even a further argument. And the further argument is, once cybercrime issue is not on the exclusive list, is not on the concurrent list, is given that is on the residual list. What gives the power to the National Assembly to levy people on it, on something that is not on the exclusive list or on the concurrent list? Nothing gives the National Assembly power to levy or tax people on it, because they don't have the power to do that to begin with. And this issue is not a new issue. There have been plethora of court decisions. The most recent of it is A.G. Rivers versus Federal Inland Attorney General of Federation, Federal Inland Revenue and Attorney General of Federation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the most recent, where the court stated that something that is on the residual list is not for the National Assembly to make laws upon or tax people in regards to it. So these are the arguments, to talk briefly in regards to the legality or illegality of the cybercrime, particularly in regards to the levy in which we're talking about.
Ms. Elias, I know you are an economist. Well, I'd like you to quickly react to that as we begin to round up our discussion.
Right. I think the major thing is that Nigerians are getting tired of eroding the purchasing power, because if you look at most government policy, especially this 1 year, has been targeting at eroding purchasing power of people. Because if you look at it right from first subsidy removal, floating naira, custom increase their tariff, and a whole lot of it. So I think at this point we need to be maybe it's a matter of things that even the president can also feel the pulse of people. So I think they should tarry, but the major thing is that as it is now, there's still implementation window. I think in the next 10 days, it will be they will start implementing this this levy. So we are calling on the president to also look at it very well. It's what they can still tarry a bit on. At least let Nigeria breathe like he normally see.
Mr. Machuku.
I think first is that, yes, government seems that their posture, like I always said, is money-centric. They are just after money. They don't care. Just like I said, the law has been in existence. They just looked at the commercialization of the law of and they dusted it and said, well, we can make some trillions.
So
we
should expect some more laws to
be Of course, there are a couple of laws that are still have some of levy attachments to them. But perhaps, yeah, there are lots. In fact, they've been suspended that one, pending, let's breathe a bit. So they are too money-centric. They are just after money. These monies, the concerns of Nigerians is not just that you are after money. Me, it's welcome on my own side that you are raising our tax to GDP from somewhere around 10% to your target is 18%. It's the usage of this money, just like I keep saying. You have over 300 billion that will be flowing into a section that can never be accounted for. Who is going to question which National Assembly will summon National Security Advisor to tell him or her how you spend these 3 billion?
Is this not likely to make people